much about glyphosate and herbicide-tolerant crops is that actually the people promoting GM would hate that. They don't like talking about herbicide-tolerant crops. They want to talk about second-generation GM. It's all different now. It's all new. You know, they tell us it's all different. They've got new GM crops that, you know, they've created with more precise techniques. And of course, they're only trying to help. They're only trying to save us from climate change and feed the poor. But, you know, they told us that first-generation GM was precise, and it isn't. They told us that first generation GM was going to increase yields and reduce pesticides. Yeah, it did for about a year until nature fought back. You know, they're telling us that they want to feed the world, but that is where they are completely and utterly missing the point. We currently produce enough food globally to feed 14 billion people. That's twice the world's population. Yeah. And yet millions are starving. Hunger and malnutrition are political problems. Growing more food won't ensure that everyone has enough to eat any more than making a load more helicopters will ensure that everyone can fly to work. It doesn't work like that. And, you know, focusing on GM as an answer actually just distracts everybody from the real problems. And do you know what? Even if all this new GM, you know, even if they could do something amazing, even if they could wash the dishes and cure, you know, provide peace in the Middle East, it's totally irrelevant to what's happening now, because all that new second generation GM is theoretical. It's all pie in the sky. The GM products that are here with us now are the same as they have been for the past 20 years. GM products are creeping into our shops here in the UK. They have to be labelled, but they're coming in and they're all first generation GM. They are herbicide tolerant soya, maize and oilseed rape. That's what's coming into our food. Domino's, the pizza people, have been selling GM pizza bases without telling their customers. They got called on it, they go in the Daily Mail, and all of a sudden they changed their website, and it's only a temporary problem. But the point is, they sold GM pizza bases to people here and broke the law. They didn't even tell them they were there. Waitrose and Marks and Spencers are both selling GM products with GM ingredients in them. They are labelled, they are obeying the law, but they're selling these kind of nasty American sweets, you know, Hershey's and Reese's and all the rest of it. And when challenged by their own customers, what they say is that they don't have GM in their own brand, but this is different. This isn't our special American sweets aisle, you know, and that's what we're dealing with in terms of, you know, the retailers who people thought they could probably rely on to stick to their guns. So it's coming, you know, it's creeping into our shops, and we have to say no. Away from that labelled stuff, the ingredients, the vast majority of non-organic meat, milk, eggs and products made with them are coming from animals that are fed GM animal feed. And again, none of those crops are these, you know, fancy new second generation. They're herbicide tolerant crops. They're the same crops that are, you know, destroying the monarch butterfly that were found wanting in our own trials. And those don't have to be labelled, so you don't even know that you're eating them. So, you know, we're also facing an unprecedented push to have GM cultivation here in the UK. Our Environment Minister, who just got a job back, thinks that GM's a great idea. The National Farmers Union seem to agree with her, and changes in EU legislation mean that it's probably going to be even easier for them to get that through than it ever was in the past. And guess what? They're not talking about the second generation crops either. They're talking about the exact same crops that were trialled here 20 years ago, that have been growing in America, that have been causing all those problems. The same kind of crops that have killed off the monarch butterfly. Do you know? And so I know I'm going on and on about this, but it's really important when you're talking to people about GM to explain to them that the hype that they hear is not the same as the food, you know, the GM crops that are going into our food. That they, you know, there may or may not be things that people can do with GM at some point in the future, but they're sure as hell not doing them now. What they're doing now is spraying them with glyphosate and multiple other pesticides. Another problem with GM crops, and this is incredibly important thinking about cultivation here in the UK, is that they don't keep themselves to themselves. Experience shows that wherever GM is grown, the non-GM relatives of those plants are contaminated very, very quickly. One of the best sound bites I think I've ever heard is this one that the people promoting GM use, where they need every tool in the box. I wish I'd thought of that. That is good. That's a really good sound bite. But GM doesn't play nice with the other tools in the box. It takes over. If GM and non-GM could live happily side by side and play in their little toolbox together, why won't Monsanto accept liability for damage caused by their crops? Why are they suing the farmers who've been polluted? Do you know, the whole thing is backwards. It's because we all know that once GM gets into the ground, it's the only tool in the box. So we need to be ready. We need to spread the word. We need to explain to people again and again the basics of what's wrong with GM. We need to explain what herbicide-tolerant crops mean. We need to explain that that is what the reality of GM is. And, we need to ensure that people understand what's wrong with GM and why it matters. So, my plea is join us. I think you're all here, you're all taking part. Keep going and protect our right to grow and eat GM free. Thank you.